Look at your bank account right now. Go ahead, I'll wait. If that number has been sitting in the same depressing range for the last 6 months, 12 months, maybe longer, if it goes up a little, then something breaks, someone gets married, life happens, and boom, you're right back where you started. Then this video is going to hit you differently than anything you've watched before. Because I'm not going to tell you to stop buying coffee. I'm not going to give you a generic budget template. And I'm definitely not going to pretend that just spend less is actual advice. What I am going to do is show you the exact mathematical and psychological framework that takes someone from financial treadmill mode, running hard, going absolutely nowhere, to hitting $100,000 in savings faster than you currently believe is possible. Here's what actually pushed me to make this video. A while back I was talking to someone I went to school with. Same background, similar income. We graduated the same year, started working around the same time. And one afternoon, she just casually drops into conversation that she's sitting on $60,000 in savings. Not bragging, just mentioning it like it was a normal thing. And I remember standing there thinking, how? How is that even a real number? Because at that point I had maybe $3,000 in my account, and I genuinely thought I was trying. I thought I was doing everything right. I was putting money aside when I could. I was being responsible. And yet there was this enormous, embarrassing gap between where I was and where she was. And the worst part? We made roughly the same money. So the problem wasn't income. The problem was something else entirely. And figuring out what that something else was, that's what changed everything for me. That's what this video is about. So before we get into the how, let's talk about the why. Why $100,000 specifically? Because this isn't an arbitrary number I picked because it sounds cool or because it fits nicely in a YouTube title. This number has been talked about by some of the most successful investors in history. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's right hand for decades, famously said the first $100,000 is the hardest part. He actually used a stronger word than hard, but we'll keep this family friendly. The point is, he wasn't joking and he wasn't being dramatic. $100,000 is the inflection point. It's the moment where money starts behaving differently. And once you understand the math behind why, you will never think about saving the same way again. Here's what I mean. If you have $100,000 invested at an 8% average annual return, which is actually below the long-term historical average of the U.S. stock market, that money earns $8,000 per year without you lifting a finger. That's $667 every single month that your money is generating while you sleep, while you're at work, while you're watching this video. Now here's where it gets really interesting. To earn that same $667 per month from your job, assuming a 30% effective tax rate, you'd need a raise of roughly $950 a month before taxes. That's more than $11,000 per year in additional salary just to match what your $100,000 would already be doing for you automatically. This is what people mean when they talk about money working for you instead of you working for money. It's not a motivational poster phrase. It's a mathematical reality. And it only kicks in at scale. When you have $5,000 saved and it grows at 8%, you made $400. That's a nice dinner and a tank of gas. It doesn't change your life. But $100,000 growing at 8% is $8,000. That starts to feel like something. That starts to actually change the way you make decisions. You stop taking whatever job is available because you need the paycheck right now. You start thinking in years instead of months. Your entire relationship with risk, with opportunity, with your career, it shifts. And all of that comes from hitting this one number. According to a 2024 Bankrate survey, 56% of Americans couldn't cover a $1,000 emergency from savings. 56%. More than half. That means most people are one car repair away from going into debt. One unexpected medical bill away from the credit card. One surprise expense away from financial stress that bleeds into every corner of their life. When you have $100,000 saved, you are in a completely different category of person. Not because you're better than anyone, but because you have options. You have breathing room. You have the ability to say no to things that don't serve you and yes to things that do. That's not a small thing. That's actually freedom. Real, practical, measurable freedom. Now let's get into the part that actually stings a little. Because if you've been trying to save and you're not hitting your targets, I can almost guarantee I know exactly why. And it's not what you think. Most people default to the same explanation. I don't make enough. And look, income matters, obviously. But data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics consistently shows that savings rates don't scale proportionally with income. People making $150,000 a year are not saving 3 times more than people making $50,000. In many cases, they're saving the same percentage or even less, which means the primary variable isn't how much you make. It's what you do with what you have. So here are the actual reasons you're stuck. Reason number 1 is the most common and the most painful to admit. You're saving the wrong way. You spend the month, you pay your bills, you cover your life, and then at the end you look at whatever's left and you move it to savings. The problem is there is never anything left. And this isn't a willpower problem or a discipline problem. It's a system design problem. You've built your financial life around a model that mathematically cannot work, because your expenses will always expand to fill your income if you let them. That's just human nature. So the fix isn't to try harder at the current system. The fix is to completely change the system. We'll talk about exactly how in a minute. Reason number 2. Your savings rate is too low to ever build meaningful wealth. Here's a number that most people find uncomfortable. If you're saving 5% of your income, you are not building wealth. You are treading water. You're keeping up appearances of being financially responsible while barely moving the needle. To actually reach $100,000 in a timeline that changes your life, you need to be saving somewhere between 20 and 30% of your take-home income. I know that sounds like I just asked you to climb Everest in flip-flops. Stay with me, because it's more achievable than it sounds, and I'm going to show you how to get there without hating your entire existence. Reason number 3, your money is in the wrong place. If your savings are sitting in a regular checking or savings account earning 0.01% interest, and yes, many accounts still pay that, then inflation is quietly destroying your purchasing power every single month. Over the last several decades, inflation has averaged somewhere between 3 and 4% per year. So if your money isn't growing at least that fast, you are technically getting poorer in real terms, even while your balance stays the same. You're losing the race while standing still. That's a brutal reality that most people don't fully absorb until they do the math on it. Reason number 4 is lifestyle inflation, and this one is sneaky because it feels like progress. You get a raise. You move to a nicer apartment. You upgrade the car. You eat out a little more. You subscribe to a few more things. None of it feels irresponsible in the moment. But suddenly your higher income has exactly the same amount left over at the end of the month as your lower income did. This is Parkinson's law applied to personal finance. Work expands to fill the time available, and expenses expand to fill the income available. It's why you can find people making $200,000 a year who feel just as financially stressed as people making $50,000. The number on the paycheck changed. The behavior didn't. And reason number 5 is the one that sounds simple but ruins more financial goals than any other. You don't have a real target or a real deadline. I want to save more money is not a goal. It is a wish. It's the financial equivalent of saying, I want to get in shape someday. No date, no number, no plan, no accountability, nothing. You need a specific destination, a specific timeline, and a specific system. Without all 3, you will always find reasons to start next month instead of right now. All right, now that we've identified exactly why the current approach isn't working, let's talk about the math. Because this is where everything changes. This is the moment where the numbers stop feeling like abstract concepts and start feeling like an actual roadmap with an actual destination. And I want you to pay close attention here, because most people never sit down and do this math, and that is exactly why most people never hit $100,000. They're trying to reach a destination without ever looking at a map. Let's say you want to save $100,000 and you're starting from zero. If you just stuffed money under your mattress, which, please don't do that, your mattress deserves better, you need to save $833 per month for 10 years to hit that number. But you're not going to do that because you're smarter than that, and also because inflation would make that $100,000 worth significantly less than it is today by the time you get there. So instead, you're going to invest that money. And here's where the math gets genuinely exciting. If you invest $833 per month at an average annual return of 8% over 10 years, you don't end up with $100,000. You end up with approximately $152,000. You only put in $100,000 of your own money over those 10 years. $833 times 12 months times 10 years, but you end up with $152,000. That extra $52,000 didn't come from your paycheck. It came from compound interest doing what compound interest does when you actually let it work. Now here's the part that really flips the script. If you want to hit exactly $100,000 in 10 years using investment returns, you only need to save about $530 per month. Not $833. $530. Because the market is doing a significant chunk of the work for you. Let that sit for a second. But now let's talk about compression, because this is where things get really interesting and where the biggest difference in outcomes gets created. What if instead of 10 years, you want to hit $100,000 in 5 years? At that same 8% return, you'd need to save around $1,350 per month. That's more per month, yes, but you're cutting the timeline in half. And more importantly, and this is the part people miss completely, once you hit $100,000 at year 5, that money starts compounding aggressively for the next 5 years while you keep adding to it. Here's what that looks like in practice. If you hit $100,000 at year 5 and you keep saving $1,350 per month for another 5 years, by year 10 you'll have approximately $282,000. Compare that to the person who took the slow and steady 10-year route. They hit $100,000 at year 10. You have $282,000 at year 10. Same decade. Same 10 years of your life. Completely different financial reality. This is why the timeline matters so much. This is why being aggressive early compounds in your favor in a way that being slow and steady simply cannot replicate. Now I can already hear you saying, okay, great, but how am I supposed to save $1,350 per month when I can barely manage $300? Fair. Completely fair. And this is exactly where the framework comes in. Because the answer isn't to just tell you to try harder. The answer is to give you a system that actually works mechanically, not just in theory. So let's build it step by step. Step 1 is to get completely clear on your actual take-home income. Not your salary, not your gross pay. The actual number that hits your bank account every month after taxes, after any 401k contributions, after everything. Let's call it $4,500 for this example. That is your real starting point. That is the only number that actually matters for this exercise. Everything else is a story you tell yourself. Step 2 is to determine your target savings rate based on your timeline. If you want to hit $100,000 in 5 to 7 years, you need to be saving between 20 and 30% of that take-home income consistently. On $4,500 per month, that's $900 to $1,350 per month going directly to your future. And before you close this video, just hang on, because step 3 is where we actually solve the problem of how to get there. Step 3 is what I call the brutal expense audit. And I mean brutal. You're going to pull up the last 3 months of your bank statements and your credit card statements, every single one, and you are going to categorize every transaction. Every coffee, every subscription, every random Tuesday night takeout order that you barely remember eating. You're going to split everything into 3 buckets. Fixed expenses you can't change immediately: rent, car payment, insurance, utilities. Fixed expenses you can change with some effort: your phone plan, gym memberships, streaming subscriptions, insurance plans that might have better rates elsewhere. And variable expenses where you have total control right now: restaurants, bars, entertainment, online shopping, impulse purchases. Most people who do this exercise for the first time discover somewhere between $300 and $800 per month that is genuinely not adding meaningful value to their lives. Not $300 in things they enjoy. $300 in things they forgot they were paying for. Things they bought out of boredom. Things they ordered because it was easy and they were tired. According to research from Ladder, the average American spends nearly $1,500 per month on non-essential items. Nearly $18,000 per year. If you redirected even half of that, $750 per month, into investments earning 8%, you'd reach $100,000 in under 7 years from that reallocation alone. Not from earning more, just from stopping the bleeding. Step 4 is restructuring your budget around a modified version of what most financial educators call the 50-30-20 rule. The traditional version says 50% of your income goes to needs, 30% to wants, and 20% to savings. And if your goal is to be comfortably average for the rest of your life, that's a perfectly fine framework. But if your goal is to actually build wealth, real wealth, not I have a savings account wealth, you're going to flip those last two numbers. 50% needs, 20% wants, and 30% goes directly to your future. Yes, that means saying no to some things your friends are doing. Yes, it means some months feel tighter than you'd like. But here's the question worth asking yourself honestly. Would you rather be comfortable today and financially stressed for the next 30 years, or would you rather be disciplined today and genuinely free for the rest of your life? Because those are actually the two options on the table. Step 5, and this is non-negotiable, automate everything. The single biggest reason people fail at saving is that they rely on willpower and good intentions. And willpower is a depletable resource that runs out around the same time that your favorite restaurant sends you a push notification on a Thursday evening. So you remove willpower from the equation entirely. The day your paycheck lands, your savings transfer happens automatically before you ever see that money in your spending account. You set it up once, you live on what's left, and you never have to make the decision again. The system makes the decision for you every single month without exception. Now, even after doing all of this, some of you are going to look at your numbers and realize that even with the expense cuts and the restructured budget, you still can't get to that 20 or 30% savings rate on your current income alone. And if that's you, here's the truth. You've hit the natural ceiling of the expense-cutting strategy. Because there is a floor to how much you can cut. You cannot reduce your rent to zero. You cannot stop eating. But there is no ceiling on how much you can earn. And increasing your income is the single fastest lever you can pull to compress your timeline to $100,000. Strategy 1 for increasing your income is the most overlooked option available to almost everyone. Ask for a raise. I know that sounds obvious and also terrifying. But data from PayScale shows that employees who ask for raises receive them at a significantly higher rate than those who don't. And only about 37% of workers have ever actually asked. The other 63% are sitting around waiting for their employer to spontaneously decide to pay them more. Which, spoiler alert, employers are not highly motivated to do unprompted. So you do your research, you find out what people in your role and your market are actually being paid, you document your contributions and your wins over the past year, and you schedule a meeting and make the case. A 10% raise on a $60,000 salary is $6,000 per year, $500 per month. That alone could cut years off your timeline to $100,000. Strategy 2 is adding a side income stream. And I want to be very specific about how this works because most people do it wrong. They start making extra money, and then they slightly upgrade their lifestyle to match the new cash flow, which completely defeats the purpose. Here's the rule. Every single dollar generated by a side income goes directly and immediately to your $100,000 goal. Not 80% of it. Not most of it. All of it. You don't need to build a business that replaces your day job. You need an extra $500 to $1,000 per month. That might come from freelancing in your professional area of expertise. It might come from consulting, from teaching a skill online, from driving a few hours a week, from selling things you already have. The specific vehicle matters far less than the discipline of redirecting every dollar from it toward your goal. If you generate an extra $800 per month from a side income and invest all of it at 8% returns, that alone gets you to $100,000 in approximately 7 years. Layer that on top of your primary savings, and you're looking at 4 to 5 years total. Strategy 3 is the one that pays dividends for your entire career, not just while you're trying to hit this first milestone. Invest in your own skills. Certifications, courses, licenses, technical skills that are in genuine demand. These are not expenses. They are the highest return investments most people have access to. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that workers with professional certifications earn roughly 20% more than those without comparable credentials. 20% more. On a $60,000 salary, that's $12,000 per year. On an $80,000 salary, that's $16,000. The compounding effect of earning more for the rest of your career because of a skill you developed in the next 6 months is genuinely difficult to overstate. Now let's talk about where this money actually goes once you've got the system running. Because if you're putting your savings into a regular savings account and calling it a day, you're leaving a significant amount of growth on the table. Your first destination should be a high-yield savings account for your emergency fund. Before you invest a single dollar in the market, You want $5,000 to $10,000 sitting somewhere accessible earning real interest. As of 2025, high-yield savings accounts are paying between 4 and 5%. That's not going to make you rich, but it means your emergency fund is at least keeping pace with inflation rather than quietly shrinking every month. Once your emergency fund is solid, the bulk of your wealth building happens in a brokerage account invested in low-cost index funds. Open an account with any of the major brokerages, Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, and invest in broad market index funds like VTSAX or VTI. The reason index funds work so well for this strategy is simple. They're diversified across thousands of companies. They have extremely low fees, and they've historically returned between 8 and 10% annually over long time horizons. You're not trying to pick winners. You're not trying to time the market. You're capturing the growth of the entire economy systematically, month after month, through something called dollar cost averaging, which just means you're buying a fixed dollar amount of shares every month regardless of whether the market is up or down. Over time, this smooths out the volatility and consistently produces strong long-term results. And if your employer offers any kind of 401k match, you contribute at least enough to capture that match before you do anything else. That is free money. Literally free. If they match 4% and you contribute 4%, you've just earned a guaranteed 100% return on that portion of your contribution before the market does anything. That is the best guaranteed return available to anyone anywhere, and a shocking number of people leave it sitting on the table because they never got around to setting it up. Additionally, if your income qualifies, maxing out a Roth IRA, the 2025 limit is $7,000 per year, about $583 per month. Gives you tax-free growth forever on that money. When you eventually hit $100,000 spread across these accounts, the portion sitting in a Roth IRA will never be taxed again as it grows. That's a compounding advantage that builds quietly in the background for decades.